The park was quiet that Tuesday afternoon. Most people were still at work and the usual crowds hadn't arrived yet. Robert Chen walked along the stone path, his expensive shoes making soft sounds against the pavement. He came here almost every day around this time, trying to escape the endless meetings and phone calls that filled his life as the CEO of a tech company. He'd built his empire from nothing, and now at 52 he had more money than he could ever spend. But lately, something felt empty. Maybe that's why he kept coming back to this park, watching ordinary people live their ordinary lives. That's when he saw her. A young woman sat on the ground near the fountain, surrounded by torn plastic bags. Groceries were scattered everywhere. Canned beans, a box of rice, some bruised apples. And in her arms, a baby was crying. The woman looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her clothes were clean but worn thin, and her shoes had holes near the toes. Robert slowed down. He usually didn't get involved in other people's problems. You couldn't help everyone, right? But something about this scene stopped him. Maybe it was the way the woman was trying so hard not to cry herself while she rocked the baby. Maybe it was the dignity in how she carefully picked up each item, even though her hands were shaking. He walked over. "Excuse me, do you need some help?" The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were red and puffy. For a moment she seemed like she might tell him to go away. People probably did that a lot when you looked like you were down on your luck. Everyone assumed you wanted something. My bag broke," she said quietly. "I'm just trying to pick everything up." Robert knelt down, ignoring the fact that his $2,000 suit was about to touch the dirty ground. He started gathering cans. "Here, let me help you." They worked in silence for a minute. The baby's crying had reduced to small hiccups. Robert noticed the woman kept glancing at him nervously, like she was waiting for him to demand something or make fun of her situation. "Thank you," she finally said as they put the last items into the one bag that wasn't completely torn. "I'm sorry for the trouble." "It's no trouble at all." Robert stood up and brushed off his knees. He should probably leave now. He'd done his good deed for the day. But he didn't move. "Are you okay? I mean, besides the bag situation." The woman's face crumbled a little. She bit her lip hard, fighting back tears. "I'm fine. We're fine." They clearly weren't fine. Robert had built a billion-dollar company by reading people, and this woman was barely holding it together. "My name's Robert. What's yours?" "Diana," she said after a pause. "And this is Lily." She looked down at the baby, who had finally stopped crying and was staring up at Robert with big brown eyes. "That's a beautiful name." Robert meant it. The baby was actually pretty cute now that she wasn't screaming. "Look, I don't want to pry, but you seem like you could use a friend right now. Is there anything I can do?" Diana laughed, but it was a sad sound. "Unless you have a spare apartment and a time machine, I don't think so." "What happened?" She hesitated. He could see her weighing whether to trust him or not. Finally, she sighed. "We got evicted this morning. I've been sitting here for 3 hours trying to figure out what to do. The shelter doesn't have any beds available until tomorrow night." Robert's chest tightened. He had 17 properties scattered across the country, most of them sitting empty. And here was a woman with a baby, about to spend the night on the streets. "Where are you heading now?" he asked. "I don't know." Diana's voice cracked. "I called everyone I could think of. My friend Ashley said we could stay with her, but she won't be home until midnight, so I guess we're just waiting." Robert looked at his watch. It was only 4 in the afternoon. 8 hours until midnight. "Have you eaten today?" Diana shook her head. "Lily had a bottle this morning. I'm okay." She wasn't okay. Nobody was okay when they had to choose between feeding themselves or their baby. Robert made a decision. "There's a cafe 2 blocks from here. Why don't we get you both some food?" "My treat." "I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because." Diana struggled for words. "Because I don't know you. And because I'm not a charity case. I never said you were." Robert kept his voice gentle. "I'm just A guy who's about to get some coffee and I'd rather not sit alone. Plus, I think Lily might enjoy the warmth inside. It's getting cold out here. As if on cue, a breeze swept through the park. Diana pulled Lily closer and wrapped her thin jacket tighter. Robert could see her resolve weakening. Just coffee. She finally agreed. And maybe some soup. The cafe was nearly empty. Robert ordered sandwiches, soup, coffee, and hot chocolate. Way more than Diana had agreed to, but she didn't protest when the food arrived. She ate slowly at first, like she was embarrassed. Then hunger took over and she ate faster. Robert watched her feed Lily with a bottle she'd warmed up. The baby drank eagerly, her tiny hands gripping her mother's fingers. "Can I ask you something?" Robert said after a while. Diana nodded, her mouth full of sandwich. "What do you do for work, I mean?" She swallowed. "I was working at a grocery store, stocking shelves, running the register, but my daycare fell through last month, and I had to bring Lily with me a few times. My boss said it was unprofessional and let me go. That's awful." "It is what it is." Diana shrugged, but Robert could see the hurt in her eyes. "I've been applying everywhere, but nobody wants to hire someone who needs to bring a baby to work. And daycare costs more than I'd make anyway, so..." She trailed off. Robert was about to respond when he noticed something sticking out of Diana's bag. Paper, but not regular paper. It had lines on it, musical staff lines. "Is that sheet music?" he asked, pointing. Diana's face changed. Just for a second, she looked almost happy. "Yeah, it's nothing really, just something I hold on to." "What piece?" "Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major." She pulled it out carefully. The paper was old and worn, but someone had protected it well. "I used to play piano a long time ago." Robert leaned forward. He'd been a music lover his whole life. His mother had been a piano teacher, and some of his earliest memories were of falling asleep to her playing. "Where did you study?" "Juilliard." "Well, almost. I got accepted and went for 2 years." Diana's voice went soft. "I was going to be a concert pianist. That was the plan anyway." "What happened?" "Life happened." Diana carefully put the sheet music back in her bag. "My mom got sick. Really sick. I had to drop out to take care of her. Then she died. Then I met Lily's father, and that didn't work out. And then there was Lily, and suddenly being a concert pianist seemed like a dream from someone else's life." Robert sat back in his chair. He'd met thousands of people in his career. Most of them wanted something from him. Money, connections, opportunities. But Diana wasn't asking for anything. She was just trying to survive one day at a time while holding on to a dream that must feel impossibly far away. "Do you still play?" he asked. "Sometimes. When I can find a piano. There was one at the community center, but they sold it last year." Diana smiled sadly. "It's okay. I've made peace with it." But she hadn't. Robert could tell. You don't carry around old sheet music if you've made peace with a lost dream. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Diana watched him nervously as he spoke quietly to someone on the other end. When he hung up, he looked at her directly. "I own some properties around the city. One of them just became available. It's not fancy, but it's clean and safe. You and Lily can stay there." Diana's eyes went wide. "I can't. That's too much. I don't even know you. You don't have to decide right now, but the offer's there. Think about it." Robert wrote an address on a napkin. "And I might have some job opportunities too. Nothing glamorous, but stable work with benefits." Diana stared at the napkin like it might disappear. "Why are you doing this?" Robert thought about his answer. "Because someone helped me once when I had nothing, and because everyone deserves a chance to get back on their feet." It wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that he saw something in Diana. A strength that reminded him of his own mother who'd worked 3 jobs to support him. A determination to give her child a better life, no matter what it cost her. Diana was crying now, but trying to hide it. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it." "Okay," she whispered. "I'll think about it." They sat there for a while longer, finishing their coffee while Lily dozed in her mother's arms. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Robert knew Diana would accept his offer. She had to. She had no other choice. What he didn't know was that this moment would change both their lives forever. 3 days later, Diana stood in front of the building Robert had written on that napkin. She'd called the number he'd given her, half expecting it to be fake, some cruel joke. But a woman named Patricia had answered, cheerful and professional, telling her that yes, an apartment was waiting for her. Yes, it was really free for the first 3 months. Yes, there was really a job opportunity available. Diana still couldn't believe it was real. The apartment was on the 4th floor of an older building in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, like Robert had said, but when Patricia unlocked the door and Diana walked inside, she wanted to cry. Again. She'd been doing a lot of that lately. It had a bedroom, a small living room, a kitchen with actual appliances, and a bathroom with a bathtub. For the past 6 months, she and Lily had been crammed into a single room wit. Each a hot plate and a shared bathroom down the hall. This felt like a palace. The furniture is basic, Patricia was saying, but if you need anything else, just let me know. Mr. Chen wants to make sure you're comfortable. This is perfect, Diana managed to say. More than perfect. Good. Patricia smiled warmly. She seemed genuinely kind, not like she was doing this out of obligation. Now about the job. Mr. Chen runs several companies. One of them needs a receptionist at their downtown office. The hours are flexible, 9 to 3, Monday through Friday. That gives you time for pickup and drop-off if you need it. Pickup and drop-off. For childcare. There's a daycare center in the building. Subsidized for employees. It's $20 a week. Diana sat down on the couch before her legs gave out. $20 a week for daycare? She'd been paying $200, and that was at the cheapest place in the city, where the workers barely paid attention to the kids. I don't understand, she said. Why is he doing all this? Patricia's expression softened. Mr. Chen is complicated. Most people think he's just a ruthless businessman. And he is in the boardroom. But he also has a foundation that helps people get back on their feet. He doesn't talk about it much. Doesn't want publicity or praise. He just does it, but why me? Maybe you reminded him of someone. Maybe he just saw someone who needed help. Does it matter? Diana thought about that. She'd spent the last few years being suspicious of everyone, always waiting for the catch, the hidden price tag. But maybe, just this once, someone was being kind without wanting anything in return. When do I start? She asked. Monday, if that works for you. It was Friday. Diana had 3 days to settle in, to let herself believe this was actually happening. The first few weeks were overwhelming. Diana showed up early every day, terrified she'd do something wrong and lose everything. The job itself wasn't complicated. She answered phones, directed visitors, managed appointments, but she worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life, determined to prove she deserved this chance. Her co-workers were nice enough, though she kept her distance. She'd learned not to get too close to people. They always left eventually, or you did, and it hurt less if you never got attached in the first place. Lily thrived at the daycare. She was eating better, sleeping better, laughing more. Diana watched her daughter discover toys she'd never been able to afford before, and something tight in her chest finally started to loosen. She didn't see Robert again. Not at first. Patricia checked in once a week, but it was always professional, making sure everything was okay, asking if Diana needed anything. Diana always said no, even when she needed a lot of things because she didn't want to seem ungrateful or demanding. 2 months passed. Diana had her first real paycheck, enough to buy Lily new clothes that actually fit, enough to stock the refrigerator with food, enough to start thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present. That's when she discovered the piano. It was late on a Thursday evening. Diana had stayed after her shift to finish some filing, and Lily had fallen asleep in her arms. She was walking through the lobby when she saw it, sitting in the corner like it had always been there. A baby grand piano, glossy black, perfectly maintained, beautiful. Diana's hands started to shake. She looked around. The building was empty except for the security guard at the front desk, and he was absorbed in his phone. Slowly, carefully, Diana walked over to the piano. She set Lily down gently in her carrier, still sleeping, and lifted the lid. The keys were perfect. Ivory white and smooth black. She touched one, barely pressing down, and the note sang out pure and clear. Her hands found their position automatically, muscle memory from years of practice. She hadn't played a real piano in so long. The community center one had been terrible, half the keys stuck or out of tune. Before that, she'd only been able to practice on the upright in her college dorm, and she'd lost access to that when she'd dropped out. Diana started to play. Just quietly, just a simple scale. But then her fingers found a melody and she was playing Chopin. The Nocturne. The one she'd carried with her through everything. The music poured out of her like water from a dam that had finally broken. All the grief, all the struggle, all the loss, all the hope she'd been too afraid to feel. Her fingers flew across the keys, and for the first time in years, she wasn't Diana, the struggling single mother. She was Diana, the pianist. Diana, the musician. Diana, who had dreams. She didn't know Robert was standing in the doorway. He'd come back to the office to pick up some papers he'd forgotten. He'd been about to leave when he heard the music. He'd frozen in place, listening, and then walked quietly to the lobby to see who was playing. When he saw it was Diana, something clicked into place. He'd helped a lot of people over the years through his foundation, given money, provided housing, created jobs. Most of them needed a hand up, and that's what he'd provided. But Diana was different. She didn't just need help surviving, she needed a chance to live. Robert watched her play for several minutes, careful not to disturb her. When she finally finished and looked up, her face was wet with tears. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, standing up quickly. "I didn't mean to. I should have asked permission. You're incredible," Robert interrupted. Diana blinked. "What? You're an incredible pianist. I mean truly exceptional." Robert walked closer. "How long has it been since you played like that?" "I don't know, years." Diana wiped her face. "I'm sorry if I disturbed anyone." "You didn't disturb anyone." "But Diana, that was the kind of talent people spend their whole lives trying to develop." Robert's mind was already working. "Have you thought about going back to school? Finishing your degree?" Diana laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With what time? What money? I have a baby and a full-time job. School is impossible. What if it wasn't?" "What do you mean?" Robert sat down on the piano bench. "I have connections in the music world. My mother was a piano teacher and I grew up around musicians. I could make some calls, see about getting you back into Juilliard or at least getting you some proper instruction again." Diana was shaking her head before he finished. "I can't accept more help. You've already done too much." "This isn't charity, Diana. This is recognizing talent that shouldn't be wasted." Robert's voice was firm. "You have a gift. A real gift, and I think you owe it to yourself and to Lily to see where it could take you." "It could take me nowhere. I'm 27 years old with a 6-month-old baby. The time for dreams like that has passed." "Says who?" Diana didn't have an answer for that. "Look," Robert continued, "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now, but would you be willing to play for someone? Just once. A friend of mine teaches at the conservatory. Let her hear you, see what she says. If she thinks I'm crazy, fine. We'll forget I mentioned it, but if she thinks you have potential, then what? Then we figure out the next step." Diana looked down at Lily, still sleeping peacefully in her carrier. She thought about her mother, who'd worked herself to death at a factory job she hated. She thought about her own dreams, packed away with that sheet music she couldn't bring herself to throw out. "One audition," she finally said. "That's all? One audition?" Robert agreed, but they both knew it was more than that. It was a door, opening just a crack, letting light into a dark room. The audition was scheduled for the following week. Robert's friend, Professor Catherine Mills, agreed to listen to Diana play. She was apparently some big deal in the classical music world, though Diana tried not to think about that too much or she'd panic. The night before, Diana couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what she was doing. This was stupid. She was going to embarrass herself. Professor Mills would take one look at her, hear her play for 30 seconds, and tell Robert he'd wasted everyone's time. But when the morning came, Diana got dressed, dropped Lily off at daycare, and took the subway to the conservatory. Professor Mills was in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through Diana. They met in a practice room with a gorgeous grand piano. "Robert tells me you're talented," Professor Mills said without preamble. "He also tells me you studied at Juilliard but didn't finish. Why?" Diana explained about her mother, keeping it brief and factual. Professor Mills listened without commenting. "What are you going to play for me?" "Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major." Predictable choice. Professor Mills sat down. "But let's see what you do with it." Diana's hands were trembling as she sat at the piano. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. She forgot about Professor Mills. She forgot about the fancy practice room and the pressure and everything else. She just played, losing herself in the music the way she always had. When she finished, there was silence. Diana opened her eyes. Professor Mills was staring at her. "How long did you say it's been since you played regularly?" "About 5 years." 5 years. Professor Mills stood up and walked to the piano. "And you play like that after 5 years. What were you like when you practiced every day?" "I don't know. Better, maybe?" "Maybe?" Professor Mills laughed. "Girl, you have something most of my students will never have. You have soul. You have feeling. You make the piano sing." She paused. "But you're also sloppy. Your technique has degraded. You're compensating with emotion, which works to a point, but it won't be a no." Ugh, at a professional level. Diana's heart sank. She'd known this would happen. "However," Professor Mills continued, "with proper training, with real practice time, you could be extraordinary. Not good, not even great, extraordinary. But I can't afford. Robert is prepared to sponsor your return to education." "Did he not tell you that?" Diana's mouth fell open. "He what?" "Typical Robert. Assumes everyone can read his mind." Professor Mills sighed. "Here's what I'm proposing. You study with me privately 3 times a week. We work on rebuilding your technique while maintaining that emotional connection you have with music. After 6 months, we reassess. If you've progressed the way I think you will, we talk about getting you into performance opportunities. I have a job and a baby, so we work around that. Evening sessions. Robert mentioned the daycare situation is handled. This isn't impossible, Diana. Difficult, yes, but not impossible." Diana felt dizzy. This was too much, too fast. "Too good to be true. Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this? Why would Robert do this?" Professor Mills smiled, and it softened her sharp features. "Because talent like yours doesn't come along often. And because Robert Chen, for all his money and power, is still the little boy whose mother gave up her own dreams to raise him. He sees her in you, and he's trying to give you what no one could give her. That's what made Diana's decision. Not the opportunity, though that was incredible. Not the promise of training or performance or any of it. It was the idea that she could be someone's second chance. That her dreams didn't have to die just because life had gotten hard." "Okay," Diana whispered. "Let's do it." Professor Mills nodded approvingly. "Then let's get to work. You have a lot of catching up to do." As Diana left the conservatory that day, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next 3 months were the hardest of Diana's life, and that was saying something considering everything she'd been through. She woke up at 5 in the morning, got herself and Lily ready, dropped Lily at daycare by 7:30, worked her receptionist job until 3, picked Lily up, went home to feed and play with her, then headed back out for her lesson with Professor Mills at 7. She usually got home around 9:30, put Lily to bed, and then practiced on a digital keyboard Robert had bought her until midnight. 4 hours of sleep a night. Every night. For months. Her coworkers started to notice she looked tired. Diana just smiled and said Lily wasn't sleeping well, which was partially true. The baby had started teething, which made nights even harder. But Diana never complained, not once. Because this was her chance, maybe her only chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. Professor Mills was brutal in her teaching. She tore apart everything Diana thought she knew about piano and rebuilt it from the ground up. Finger position, wrist movement, the way she used the pedals, the way she breathed while playing. Everything had to be perfect. You're talented. But talent means nothing without discipline, Professor Mills told her after a particularly frustrating session where Diana had played the same passage 40 times and still hadn't gotten it right. Talent gets you in the door. Discipline keeps you in the room. There were nights Diana wanted to quit. Nights she was so exhausted she couldn't see straight. Nights Lily wouldn't stop crying and Diana had to choose between comforting her daughter and practicing. And she chose Lily every time. which meant falling further behind. Robert checked in occasionally, always professionally, never intrusive. He'd ask how lessons were going, if she needed anything. Diana always said everything was fine, even when it wasn't, because she didn't want him to think she couldn't handle this. Then, during the third month, something shifted. Diana was playing a particularly complex Rachmaninoff piece, one that had been giving her trouble for weeks. Her fingers kept tripping over each other in the fast passages, and she couldn't get the emotional weight right in the slow sections. She'd practiced until her hands ached, until she'd memorized every note, but something was still missing. She was in the middle of another practice session, frustration building, when suddenly it clicked. Her hands knew what to do. The music flowed out of her like it had been waiting there all along, just beneath the surface. The fast parts sparkled, the slow parts sang, and for the first time since she'd started lessons, Diana felt like a real pianist again. When she finished, she looked up to find Professor Mills standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "That's it," the professor said quietly. "That's what I've been waiting for." "I don't know what happened," Diana said, breathless. "It just suddenly made sense. That's how it works. You practice and nothing changes, and then suddenly everything changes all at once." Professor Mills came into the room. "Diana, I think you're ready." "Ready for what?" "To perform. Publicly." Diana's stomach dropped. "I'm not ready for that." "Yes, you are. You're as ready as you're going to be without actual performance experience." Professor Mills pulled out her phone. "Robert's Foundation is hosting a charity event next month. Small audience, mostly donors and supporters. They always have musical entertainment. Usually it's recorded music or a DJ, but I think this year they should have you." "No, absolutely not." Diana stood up, panic rising. "I can't perform in front of people. I haven't done that in years. What if I mess up? What if you don't?" Professor Mills interrupted. "What if you're brilliant? What if this is exactly what you need to move forward?" "I'll freeze. I'll forget everything." "Maybe. Probably not, but maybe." Professor Mills shrugged. "But Diana, if you can't perform, then all of this practice, all of this training, what's it for? Music isn't meant to be played alone in a practice room. It's meant to be shared." Diana sat back down, her heart pounding. She thought about those dreams she used to have of playing in concert halls, of making people feel something through her music. She'd packed those dreams away, told herself they were childish fantasies, but maybe they didn't have to be. "How many people?" she asked. "About 100. That's not small. It's intimate compared to a real concert." Professor Mills smiled. "I'll be there. Robert will be there. You'll have support." Diana closed her eyes. She could do this. She'd survived eviction, poverty, raising a baby alone. She could survive a piano recital. What would I play? That's up to you. I'd suggest starting with the Chopin Nocturne, since that's your signature piece. Then maybe the Rachmaninoff you just played, and something else, something that shows your range. They spent the next 2 weeks choosing repertoire and practicing specifically for performance. Professor Mills taught Diana techniques for managing stage fright, for recovering if she made a mistake, for connecting with the audience. Diana practiced until her fingers felt like they might fall off. She practiced the pieces forwards and backwards. She practiced in the dark, with the lights on, sitting, standing, with distractions. She wanted to be so prepared that nothing could throw her off. Robert came to visit 3 days before the performance. Diana was at home, practicing on her digital keyboard while Lily played with blocks on the floor. When she heard the knock, she wasn't expecting to see him standing there with a garment bag. "Robert, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine."
"Can I come in?"
She let him in, suddenly aware of how small and simple her apartment must seem to someone like him. But Robert didn't seem to notice or care. He set the garment bag on the couch carefully. "Professor Mills told me about the performance," he said. "I wanted to bring you this." Diana unzipped the bag and gasped. Inside was a dress. Deep blue, elegant, simple, but beautiful. Exactly the kind of thing a pianist would wear for a recital. "I can't accept this," she said automatically. "Diana." Robert's voice was patient. "You've said that about everything I've offered you. The apartment, the job, the lessons. And every time you've accepted because you knew it was the right thing to do. This is the right thing too. You need something appropriate to wear, and I want you to have it." Diana touched the fabric. It was soft, expensive. She'd never owned anything like it. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. "Please tell me the truth." Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down and his face looked tired in a way she hadn't seen before. "My mother was a piano teacher," he started. "I told you that. What I didn't tell you was that she was also an incredibly talented pianist herself. She could have been a concert performer. She had the skill, the passion, everything. What happened? She got pregnant with me. My father left. She had to support us both, so she gave up performing and just taught lessons out of our tiny apartment." Robert smiled sadly. She never complained. She said I was her greatest accomplishment and music was just music. But I'd see her sometimes late at night when she thought I was asleep, playing pieces she'd never perform for anyone, and she'd have this look on her face like she was somewhere else, somewhere she'd never get to go. Diana sat down next to him, understanding washing over her. "She died when I was 20, Robert continued. "Heart attack. Sudden. I'd just started my first company and I kept thinking I'd make enough money to give her a comfortable retirement, let her play as much as she wanted, but I ran out of time. I'm sorry. When I saw you in that park with that sheet music." Robert looked at her. "You had that same look my mother used to have, like there was this whole world inside you that no one else could see. And I thought, and if I couldn't give my mother that world, maybe I could help someone else find it." Diana felt tears building. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll really try. Not because you owe me anything, but because you owe it to yourself." "I promise." Robert stood up. "Good. Now, about this performance. Are you nervous?" "Terrified." "Good. If you weren't nervous, I'd be worried. It means you care." He headed toward the door, then paused. "Diana, you're going to be amazing. I know it." After he left, Diana held the dress and cried. Not sad tears. Not scared tears. Just overwhelming gratitude that someone believed in her this much. The night of the performance arrived too quickly. Diana got ready carefully, putting on the blue dress, doing her makeup with hands that shook slightly. Patricia had offered to watch Lily during the performance, along with her own kids, and Diana had gratefully accepted. She kissed her daughter goodbye, then took a cab to the venue. It was a beautiful space, elegant but not overwhelming. There was a piano on a small stage and chairs arranged in neat rows. People were already arriving, dressed in expensive clothes, chatting and laughing. Diana felt like she might throw up. Professor Mills found her backstage. "Breathe, just breathe. I can't do this." "Yes, you can. You've prepared. You know these pieces backwards and forwards. All you have to do is share them." Robert appeared then, looking concerned. "Diana, are you okay?" She wasn't okay. She was the opposite of okay. But she nodded anyway because what choice did she have? She'd come this far. She couldn't back out now. The audience settled into their seats. Someone introduced her, though Diana barely heard the words. She walked onto the stage and the lights made it hard to see faces, which was maybe a blessing. She sat at the piano, her hands found the keys, and she began to play. The Chopin Nocturne flowed out first, familiar and comforting. Her fingers knew this piece so well they could play it while she slept. As she played, her nervousness started to fade. This was just music. Just her and the piano, like it had always been. The audience disappeared. The fancy venue disappeared. Everything disappeared except the notes. She moved through her repertoire piece by piece. The Rachmaninoff was technically challenging, but her hands didn't stumble. A Debussy piece, dreamy and atmospheric. And finally, a Beethoven sonata, powerful and emotional. When she played the final chord, there was a moment of silence. Then the applause began. Diana stood up, dazed. People were standing. Some were crying. She looked out into the audience and found Robert in the third row. He was crying too, not even trying to hide it. Professor Mills was right. Music was meant to be shared. And for the first time in years, Diana felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The morning after the performance, Diana woke up convinced it had all been a dream. But her phone was full of messages and the blue dress was hanging in her closet, and Lily was babbling happily in her crib, so it must have been real. Professor Mills called first. 3 people asked for your contact information last night. 1 was a talent agent, 1 was from a recording studio, and 1 was the director of programming for the Lincoln Center. Diana nearly dropped her phone. "You're joking. I never joke about music. Check your email." Diana opened her laptop with shaking hands. There they were. 3 professional emails, each one complimenting her performance and asking if she'd be interested in discussing opportunities. What do I do? Diana asked, panic rising. You respond professionally, set up meetings, and see what they have to say. This is good, Diana, this is really good, but Diana didn't feel good. She felt overwhelmed. A week ago, she'd been a struggling single mother working a receptionist job. Now people from the Lincoln Center wanted to talk to her? It didn't make sense. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Robert stopped by her office that afternoon. Can we talk? They went to a quiet conference room. Robert looked serious, which made Diana nervous. I wanted to talk to you about next steps, he said. Last night was incredible, but it was just the beginning. If you really want to pursue music professionally, we need to think strategically. Strategically? You got attention from your performance, which is great. But attention fades fast. You need to build on this momentum. Robert pulled out a folder. I've put together some options. You could record a demo album and shop it to labels. You could apply to performance competitions. You could work toward getting back into Juilliard and finish your degree. Or you could do a combination of all three. Diana stared at the folder. Each option was laid out in detail with timelines, costs, pros and cons. Robert had obviously spent hours on this. This is too much, she said quietly. You've already done too much. Diana, we've been over this. No, listen to me. Diana took a deep breath. I'm grateful. I'm more grateful than I can ever express. But I need to understand what you expect from me, because nobody does all this for nothing. So what's the catch? What do you want? Robert was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than usual. I want to see you succeed. That's all. I want to see you become the pianist you were meant to be. I want to watch you play in concert halls and know that I helped make that possible. Is that so hard to believe? Yes, Diana said honestly. Because in my experience, everyone wants something. I'm not everyone, I know. That's what scares me. Diana looked at him directly. What if I fail? What if I'm not as good as you think I am? What if all this time and money you're investing in me turns out to be wasted? Then it's wasted. I can afford it. Robert leaned forward. Diana, I built a company from nothing. I know about risk. I know about failure. And I know about potential. You have something special. But more importantly, you have drive. You have discipline. You showed up to every lesson exhausted, but you showed up. You practiced until your hands hurt. You pushed through fear to perform. Those qualities matter more than talent. But what if it's not enough? What if it is? Diana didn't have an answer for that. She'd spent so long preparing for disappointment that she didn't know how to prepare for success. Over the next 2 weeks, she met with the talent agent, the recording studio representative, and the Lincoln Center director. Each meeting felt surreal. The talent agent, a sharp woman named Veronica, wanted to represent Diana and book her for small venue performances around the city. Build your reputation slowly but steadily, she advised. Let people discover you. The recording studio wanted to produce a debut album of classical pieces. The market for classical music is smaller than pop, the producer admitted, but there's always room for genuine talent. The Lincoln Center director offered something different, a slot in their Emerging Artists series. One performance 6 months away in one of their smaller halls. It's not Carnegie Hall, he said, but it's a prestigious platform. Critics will be there. It could launch your career. Diana left each meeting feeling more overwhelmed than before. How was she supposed to choose? How was she supposed to know which opportunity was the right one? Professor Mills helped her think through the options. The agent makes sense for building steady work. The album would be good for your portfolio. But the Lincoln Center performance? Diana, that's the golden ticket. That's the kind of opportunity most pianists dream about their whole lives. But what if I'm not ready? 6 months is enough time to prepare. We'd work intensively, polish your repertoire, get you performing ready. Professor Mills studied her. But Diana, you have to decide if this is what you really want, not what Robert wants for you, not what I want for you, what you want. That night, Diana lay awake thinking. Lily was asleep next to her, one tiny hand clutching Diana's finger. She thought about her life before. The constant stress, the fear, never knowing if she'd have enough money to feed her daughter. She thought about the dreams she'd buried because they seemed impossible, and she thought about the piano, about how it felt to lose herself in music, about the faces in the audience at the charity event. Moved by something she'd created, she wanted this. Not because Robert believed in her, though that mattered. Not because Professor Mills thought she had potential, though that helped. but because music was the only thing that had ever made her feel truly alive. The next morning, Diana called Robert. "I want to do the Lincoln Center performance, and I want to work with the agent. And I want to eventually record an album. I want all of it." She could hear the smile in Robert's voice. "Then let's make it happen." The next few months were intense. Diana continued working her receptionist job, but Robert adjusted her hours to give her more practice time. She worked with Professor Mills 6 days a week now, preparing specific pieces for the Lincoln Center performance. Veronica, her new agent, started booking her for small gigs, private parties, corporate events, restaurant background music. Nothing glamorous, but it was performing experience and it paid. Diana was actually earning money from piano, something she'd never imagined possible. Lily turned 1 year old. Diana threw her a small party at the apartment, inviting Robert, Professor Mills, Patricia, and a few co-workers. Watching her daughter smash her face into birthday cake, surrounded by people who'd become like family, Diana felt happiness she'd forgotten was possible. But as the Lincoln Center performance got closer, old fears started creeping back. What if I'm only good in small venues? She asked at Professor Mills during a lesson. What if I get on that stage and freeze? What if the moon falls out of the sky? Professor Mills replied dryly, "Diana, you can't live in what-ifs. You prepare, you practice, and then you trust yourself." "I don't know if I trust myself." "Then trust me. I've taught hundreds of students. I know talent when I see it. You belong on that stage." 2 months before the performance, Diana got an unexpected phone call. A number she didn't recognize. "Is this Diana Torres?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, my name is James Torres. I'm your father." Diana's blood went cold. She hadn't heard from her father in over 15 years. He'd left when she was 12, just disappeared one day and never came back. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice hard. "I heard about your performance coming up at the Lincoln Center. I saw it advertised online, and I'd like to come. I'd like to see you play." Diana's hand tightened on the phone. "No, Diana, please. I know I wasn't there for you. I know I messed up, but I'm trying to make things right now. I'm sober, I'm clean, I have a job." "No," Diana repeated louder. "You don't get to show up now that things are going well. You weren't there when Mom was sick. You weren't there when I dropped out of school. You weren't there when I was living on the streets with a baby. You don't get to be there for the good parts. I understand you're angry. I'm not angry. I'm done." Diana hung up. She was shaking. Lily looked up at her with concerned eyes, sensing something was wrong. Diana picked her up and held her tight, breathing in her daughter's baby shampoo smell until her heart stopped racing. That night, she told Robert about the call. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know. I thought I was past all that. I thought I'd made peace with him being gone. But hearing his voice just brought everything back." Diana rubbed her face. "He wants to come to the performance. Do you want him there?" "No, maybe. I don't know." Diana laughed bitterly. "Isn't that pathetic? After everything, part of me still wants him to see me succeed. Wants him to regret leaving. That's not pathetic. That's human." Robert was quiet for a moment. "My father wasn't around much either. He left when I was a baby, and when my company got big, when I started appearing in newspapers and magazines, he tried to come back, wanted to reconnect. What did you do?" I told him no, and I've never regretted it." Robert looked at her. "But Diana, that was my choice. You have to make yours. There's no right answer here, just what feels right for you." Diana thought about it for days. Finally, she decided. Her father could come to the performance if he wanted, but she wouldn't give him special treatment. He'd be just another face in the audience. That was all he'd earned. As the performance date approached, Diana's practice intensified. She was playing 6-7 hours a day. Her hands ached constantly. She dreamed in music. Professor Mills was relentless, pushing her harder than ever before. Good isn't good enough. Great isn't good enough. You need to be unforgettable. 1 week before the performance, Diana had a breakdown. She was practicing the same passage for the 100th time, and she still couldn't get it right. Her fingers kept stumbling. The timing was off. Everything was wrong. "I can't do this," she shouted, slamming her hands on the keys. "I'm not good enough. I'm going to embarrass myself and everyone who believed in me." Professor Mills let her rant. When Diana finally ran out of steam, the professor spoke calmly. "Are you finished?" "Yes." "Good, now listen to me. Every performer, no matter how experienced, goes through this. It's called pre-performance panic. It's normal. It doesn't feel normal. Of course it doesn't, but Diana, you are good enough. You're more than good enough. And you know what? Even if you make mistakes, even if it's not perfect, you'll still be sharing something beautiful with the world. That matters more than perfection. Diana took a shaky breath. What if they hate it? They won't, but if they do, so what? You'll have more performances, more chances. This isn't your only shot. It feels like it. I know, but it's not. Professor Mills put a hand on her shoulder. Diana, you've come so far. From that park bench to here. Don't let fear steal this moment from you. That night, Diana held Lily and thought about everything she wanted to tell her daughter someday. About being brave even when you're scared. About taking chances even when they might not work out. About believing in yourself when no one else does. And she realized that's what this performance was really about. Not proving anything to her father or to Robert or to the critics who'd be in the audience. It was about proving something to herself. She could do this. She would do this. And whatever happened, she'd survive it. She always had. The day of the Lincoln Center performance arrived cold and bright. Diana woke up early, her stomach in knots, and spent an hour just holding Lily, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Patricia came by at noon to pick up Lily. You're going to be amazing, she said, giving Diana a tight hug. I've got everything under control here. Just focus on your music. Diana spent the afternoon trying to relax, which was impossible. She took a long bath, practiced light finger exercises, ate food she couldn't taste. Robert had arranged for a car to pick her up at 5. The performance started at 7:30. When she arrived at the Lincoln Center, the reality of what she was about to do hit her like a wave. This wasn't a small charity event. This was one of the most famous performance venues in the world. People came from all over to hear music here. And she was about to play on that stage. Professor Mills found her backstage. How are you feeling? Like I might pass out. Good, that means you're alive. The professor smiled. Diana, I want you to remember something. Everyone in that audience is there because they want to hear beautiful music. They're on your side. They want you to succeed. What if I forget the notes? You won't, your hands know these pieces. Trust them. Professor Mills squeezed her shoulder. And if something does go wrong, you keep playing. You improvise. You recover. Professional musicians make mistakes all the time. What matters is how you handle them. Diana nodded, trying to absorb the advice. Her hands were cold despite the warm building. At 7 o'clock, she peeked through the curtain at the audience filing in. The hall wasn't huge, maybe 300 seats, but it felt massive. She saw Robert in the 4th row talking to someone. Professor Mills was near the back. Veronica, her agent, was there with a notebook, probably ready to take notes. And in the middle section, she saw him. Her father. He looked older than she remembered, grayer, but it was definitely him. He was alone, holding a program, looking around nervously. Diana's chest tightened. She hadn't truly believed he'd come. Someone touched her arm. It was the stage manager. 5 minutes, Ms. Torres, 5 minutes. Diana's mouth went dry. She went to the bathroom and splashed water on her face carefully, trying not to ruin her makeup. She looked at herself in the mirror. The blue dress Robert had given her looked beautiful. Her hair was styled simply but elegantly. She looked like a professional pianist. You can do this, she whispered to her reflection. You've survived worse. Backstage, the stage manager gave her a thumbs up. The house lights dimmed. Someone walked out to introduce her. Diana heard her name, heard applause. And then she was walking onto the stage. The lights were bright. The piano gleamed. She sat down, adjusted the bench, let her hands rest on the keys. The audience went silent. Diana closed her eyes, took a breath, and began to play. The Chopin Nocturne. The same piece she'd carried with her through everything. Her fingers found the melody automatically, and suddenly she wasn't in the Lincoln Center. She was back in her college dorm, playing this piece for the first time, falling in love with its melancholy beauty. She was in her mother's hospital room, humming it while her mother slept. She was in the park with torn grocery bags and a crying baby, clutching sheet music like a lifeline. The music poured out of her, all her pain and hope and love woven into every note. When she finished the Chopin, she moved immediately into Rachmaninoff. This piece was different, powerful and complex, technically demanding. Her hands flew across the keys and she felt invincible. She felt like she could play forever and never get tired. The Debussy came next. dreamy and atmospheric. And finally, Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique, the piece she'd practiced more than any other. Emotional, dramatic, heartbreaking. As she played the final movement, tears started rolling down her face. She didn't try to stop them. She just kept playing, letting everything she'd been holding back flow through the music. She thought about her mother, who'd sacrificed everything. She thought about Lily, who deserved a better life. She thought about Robert, who'd seen something in her worth saving. She thought about Professor Mills, who'd pushed her to be better than she thought possible. And yes, she thought about her father sitting in that audience, watching the daughter he'd abandoned become someone he'd never know. The final chord rang out. Diana held it, letting it fade naturally, her foot on the sustain pedal until the sound disappeared completely. Silence. Then the audience exploded into applause. Diana stood up, shaking, and looked out at the crowd. They were standing, all of them. People were crying. Someone in the balcony was whistling. She found Robert in the audience. He was standing with tears streaming down his face, clapping so hard it must have hurt. Next to him, Professor Mills was beaming with pride. Diana took a bow, overwhelmed. She'd done